It's likely that some of the darkest times for teens right now is when they act on how they feel, how their kind of mental health is right now. When teens act on how they feel, sometimes it can be kind of detrimental. They can turn to different things that might be self harm. And what happens when teens do that? Is there collateral damage? Not only to themselves, but also to their siblings, to the parents, to the social institutions that care a lot about them, like their schools or churches. Can lead a lot of us to really dark places and really challenge growth in the ways that God has designed us to grow. How do we combat that? Dr. Kathy has some insights, and we're going to turn to her next.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
Dr. Kathy, suicide rates continue to rise, but remain a statistically rare event. Therefore, we need to kind of probably consider not just death by suicide, but the far-reaching impact of all suicidal behaviors. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reports that for every suicide death, there were 3 hospitalizations for self-harm, 8 ED visits related to suicide, 38 self-reported suicide attempts in the last year, and 265 individuals who seriously considered suicide in the past year. 1 in 3, although these numbers represent adults, one could expect similar trends in adolescents. These hospitalizations, ED visits, and incidents of self-harm give further insight into the scope of the collateral damage associated with suicidal behavior. When suicidal behavior in adolescence occurs in a vulnerable, low-risk area, the impact is oftentimes magnified. So, Dr. Kathy, it's incredibly likely for kids and for many of us who are parents or work with kids that we have friends even who have experienced depression or anxiety to the degree that leads to what I would call kind of maybe a suicidal episode or different thought patterns. What is important for us to understand when someone who has experienced these thought patterns of thinking, how is their identity maybe impacted when they have walked down this road of anxiety or depression that leads to some kind of manifestation in a suicidal episode or experience?
One of the things that we say often here is that our thought patterns do influence the identity. They do influence who we become, what we do, who we relate to. So when somebody is in a depressed state for a season, for a while, a depressed state enough that they're contemplating ending their lives, they're not going to invest in themselves. They're not going to study. They're not going to play. They're not going to go out for sports. They're going to maybe distance themselves from key relationships for fear that the depth of their depression would be seen, and then somebody might want to get them help. And in this space, they don't want to help. So of course it's tragic, because then you begin the slippery slope of, I don't have much. And they don't have as much as they could have because they've chosen to stay in a depressed, anxious state. Then they feel even more depressed. And then the decision to take their life becomes an even, if you will, easier decision. And I don't even like saying that, because it should never be an easy decision. However it is, when you surround yourself with the negativity. I heard someone speak recently who said something I've heard before, but in this particular day, I audibly gasped when this young man said it. He had tried to kill himself, and he said, I didn't want to kill myself. I wanted to kill my anxiety. Powerful statement. There are so many young people who are so burdened by how they feel and their thought life and the decisions they're making that only get them into trouble, etc. And they don't know how to overcome that. And that's what they want to end. We can talk with them about this.
Yeah, Dr. Kathy, I do really agree with you. We can kind of engage this and, understand, like you said, that kid might not necessarily be at that place where they're wanting to terminate kind of where really what they're looking to terminate is their feeling or their anxiety. But kind of going into this, when someone comes to that place where they're experiencing maybe something that's led them to have kind of this, I would call it again, that suicidal episode, there's often collateral damage with that attempt or with that experience. Friends and family, schools and churches are often kind of awakened to a harsh reality of where somebody's mindset or place might be. In these events, what kind of growth do you think is maybe stunted, not just from the student experiencing it, but also the opportunity for friends or family or schools and churches in terms of kind of how we then engage kids and help them explore, develop. What should we kind of be conscious of as we engage kids and kind of even our communities to help rebuild some of the foundations of identity that really allow kids to explore who God is calling them to be, knowing that oftentimes when an episode like this has occurred, it can stunt that development or that growth in identity.
I think it's quite likely that young people, even adults who are contemplating suicide, have attempted suicide, or are related to people who actually have successfully killed themselves, we won't take risks. I think we become more fragile. Probably we will slow down our intellectual, social, emotional, spiritual growth. I think doubts become probably the mantra, if you will. I know that one of the things that parents deal with, it's really, really hard, is the sibling left behind. Or if a child tried to kill himself and was not successful, but is in a mental health facility or going to therapy every other day, you're fearful for the younger kids. Are they depressed too? What are they aware of that their brother is aware of? So the sibling dynamic changes, the way that you parent out of fear now and out of maybe concern that you would almost smother and not let your kids be alone. Like, my heart goes out to these moms and dads, and I understand that. And yet I want to say that, without the freedom to become, as so much damage can be done as well. I think the biggest stunting that I think of, Wayne, I think this all changes our view of God. I think when somebody is depressed enough to want to end their life, and if they're a believer and they've called out to God, they wonder where he is. And they might wonder their whole life, where is he? Where was he then? I have talked to many parents who have lost children to suicide who have run toward God. And I just am so impressed by their choice to maintain their faith. And I know of many others who stay up weeping every night. Where was God? Why didn't God prevent my child from killing himself? So I think it changes our perspective on God's involvement in our lives. Is God good? Does God love? Does God protect? Does he redeem? These are real questions. And I think, again, for the younger siblings left behind, if a suicide attempt was successful, their potential view of God is very damaged. And this is where I would emphasize the love I would have for those people would be make sure that they know what the Bible says about evil and suffering and choice and free will and God.
Yeah, Dr. Kathy, I think that's a really helpful kind of process for us to engage or even walk down when we're kind of faced with this. When we think about this, how do we see, kids process grief or fear from these events, maybe thinking through it with their different smarts? What should parents and those that work with kids understand about the various ways that kids engage and kind of understand fears or anxieties or concerns or doubts, to really, how can we kind of do that in a way that builds resiliency for our kids rather than maybe drive them to this place of fears? How do we kind of maybe engage anxiety or fear or depression using the smarts as a tool of combating it?
That's a fascinating question. So that I just recently spoke at the Next Gen convention for the American Association of Christian Counselors. And I was so privileged to do a very quick 30-minute overview of the smarts. And when we got to Nature Smart, and Nature Smart people think with patterns, I brought up a picture of a seashell design that an 11-year-old boy made to process the grief of losing his dog. And there was an audible gasp in the room. The mom and the dad and 4 kids were in the living room talking about their dog and telling stories about their dog. When the mom and dad recognized their son was missing, the mom went down the hall, found him in his bedroom on the floor with seashells and making a design. And the mom brilliantly said, "Tell me about your design." And he talked about the dog as he talked about the design and why he chose this seashell and put it there and this seashell and put it there. It's absolutely remarkable. I never could have done that because I'm not smart in that particular way. So if we let our children be who they were created to be and don't expect them to be like us, then maybe they will process the grief and their fear and the anxiety and the depression more quickly. So word smart people like to talk. You're going to have to listen to their story. Logic smart people think with questions. They love to solve problems. They don't like it when things seem unfair. So logic smart kids, I think, could really struggle with what they consider to be bad or stupid decisions that other people make because they'll see the logic of it all and wonder why didn't they know that that was a bad idea. Picture smart people think with pictures and visuals. So let them doodle and draw. Let them take a black marker or crayon and draw the whole piece of paper black, because that's how sad they are. And then let them talk about it as well. Music smart people, one of my favorite assignments is to have, and we're all 8. So you have a music smart kid, go find a piece of classical music that uses percussion that describes your brain when your daddy leaves. Or go find a piece of classical music that has percussion that sounds like your heart now that grandma has died. And they'll find a piece with loud timpani and a lot of cymbal crashes. And on the other hand, you can assign to a child, find a piece of classical music that describes the peace in your home when you're all in agreement that God is love. It's fascinating. And then body smart, movement, and touch. So you let them get the, grief out by the 10 jumping jacks and by the shooting of the hoops and the rocking in a rocking chair really fast. And these are stereotype kind of answers, but they work. They really do work. Body smart kids, they touch. So they do need to be hugged and, wrestle on the floor and their hair tousled by the grandpa who loves them so. And then people smart people think with people, and self-smart people think alone. So if you have a self-smart person in your family or a good friend of someone who's tragically going through a hard time, they will want to think alone. If a child has always had time alone, don't be fearful of their need to separate and be alone. But if a child has usually been with the family and with the friends and all of a sudden is doing a lot of separation into the bedroom, then I would wonder what's going on. It could be that self-smart is being awakened by this unique experience. Then that's nothing to be afraid of. But it could be that your child knows something or is feeling something and doesn't want you to know it, and so is choosing to isolate. I would be in there to have conversations. But again, self-smart people do think with reflection inside of themselves. The opposite would be those of you who are raising people-smart people who just have to talk to people all of the time. And if you're not that way, that can be the exhausting child.
As Dr. Kathy was talking today, it reminded me of a prayer that David prayed out of 1 Chronicles 17, and I'm going to begin reading at verse 23. And now, Lord, let the promise you have made concerning your servant and his house be established forever. Do as you promised, so that it will be established and that your name will be great forever. Then the people will say, the Lord, the God of Israel, is Israel's God, and the house of your servant David will be established before you. You, my God, have revealed to your servant that you will build a house for him. So your servant has found courage to pray to you. You, Lord, our God, you have promised these good things to your servant. Now you have been pleased to bless the house of your servant, that it may continue forever in your sight. For you, Lord, have blessed it, and it will be blessed forever. David prays this prayer in the middle of really kind of a depressing time for him. He's really challenged in many ways, but he's reminded continually of God's faithfulness, and it gives him courage to do something dynamic, courage to pray. And I wonder if in these times, especially these times with our kids where they're experiencing some of them really incredible anguish, incredible challenges, incredible situations that make them wonder what's really good or secure in their life, that if driving them to remember what God is doing and what God has said, and then to remember that God is one that is with them, that walks with them, that listens to them, that gives them the courage to even utter concerns to him, to pray to him. I wonder if doing that is something that can give really kids a bright light that shines and cuts through some of the darkest times that they're going to experience and face. And maybe these dark times are building resiliency for them to pray, to seek God in hard times. I hope that's an encouragement for you, and I hope this podcast is an encouragement for you. We'd love to hear some of your feedback. What's God kind of showing you? What are some challenges that you're experiencing? If you have any thoughts that you'd like to give to us, you can email me, Wayne, that's WAYNE, at celebratekids.com. And in addition to that, I want to encourage you to sign up for Dr. Kathy's new course that she's offering on our website. The course is Character Over Obedience, and it goes to some of the things that we even talked about today. You can sign up for this course at celebratekids.com. We've got a new live Q&A session coming up next week that we really want you to come to and have some thoughts coming from the course that you'd like to have Dr. Kathy unpack more. Again, just go to celebratekids.com and sign up for the course there. I want to thank you for listening to the Celebrate Kids podcast in this, our daily segment, Face in the Dark. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, my name is Wayne Stender. I'm so thankful that you're listening, and we're looking forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.